Call it up, man.
Oh, scene one,
Finding the
take
Funk.
one.
Arthur Baker, take one. Thank you, brother. That's what
All
I need. A
right.
little. Come on, give me a little something.
Just one more time. Okay. One more time. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Hey, man, tell us who you are.
Arthur Baker, record producer, DJ, and funk fanatic.
What is funk music to you, Arthur?
Funk to me is a great drum beat with a kick and bass and a funky guitar. Like rhythm guitar, I think is probably the most important part of funk is the rhythm guitar. To me, you can have crappy drummer, not a great bass player, but if you have a great rhythm guitar, people are going to dance to it. So I've always been a fan of the guitar.
Okay, talk a little bit about of the. If you had to name the artist to you who defined funk for you.
Well, for me, when I was a kid, probably the first band that I would consider a funk band that I was really a fan of, and it wasn't a pure funk band, would have been Sly and the Family Stone, because it sort of merged rock and funk, but the elements were all there. Obviously, Larry Graham and the band, but basically, that to me sort of it defined funk because Sly just Sly was a funky guy, and he was odd, he was different, he was a spaceman. He was just the first guy to sort of take it to that next level. So I know that other people did funk before, but I think he brought it to the 70s. I guess he was the guy who brought it to the 70s.
Talk about what as a young musician. What attracted you? What records and what attracted you to funk as a young guy?
Well, I would say, as I said, the Sly thing, the Stand album, and the albums earlier were things that lyrically they were very strong. They basically they basically hit home to me in a way that Motown or something like that, early Motown, which was probably early Motown was probably the first black music I got into, and basically that was very pop. And when funk came along, whether it was James Brown or Sly, and even Jimi Hendrix in a way, because I'd say he was hitting the funk groove also. It was more freedom. It was actually more for someone who was into rock and roll. Funk you could relate to a little bit more. It was live bands. It had personality. It had all that merged together. So it wasn't just the music. There were crazy characters from day one. Funk musicians were personalities. Whether it was Sly, James Brown, George Clinton later on, they had big personalities, and they could compete with the rock personality. Whereas a lot of the Motown and I mean they just didn't weren't allowed to have that freedom, and I would say funk is freedom, freedom to play and freedom to rock out. So I think it was more of a musician's music than a producer's music in a way. It was more playing than being constrained by arrangements. The arrangements were sort of created as people went along.
Talk a bit about I love that idea about Hendrix. Talk about how Hendrix you feel fits into the funk thing.
Well, I think he was really influenced by, in a way, he was influenced by Sly. I mean, I think everyone from Miles Davis to James Brown to Norman Whitfield to Motown, Sly just came out and sort of changed the whole game. And I think, whereas I'm sure he was influenced by Hendrix also, but he took it a little bit further and he brought the horns in, and it was a real sort of merging of different cultures, but he felt at home with all of them. I mean, Sly started out as a rock producer. He did a lot of crazy songs that you would never associate with him. But the fact is, he sort of married what was going on. He was a true pop producer in a way, but then he took it the next step further, and he was able to lock into the element of the radicalism of the Vietnam War, of everything that was going on in the 60s and 70s. And he was able to sort of put that in words and into music that made sense for everybody. So anyone could relate to Sly. Like the first time I heard Sly songs, I was in junior high school, and there was a band that would play at the dance, and they would play a band called the Concessions. I just remember the name, and they would play, and you'd hear Sly stand and all the stuff that he was doing at the time, and kids really related to it because it had a message, and it really hit home. So I think both musically and culturally and the look of it and everything, it was really genius. And I think that he had his 3 or 4 years that were just the most. He was the most important musician in the world.
Talk about the there's a riot going on and its impact.
Well, he just was really smart and really in tune with